A black belt mocked Keanu Reeves on camera, challenging him to a fight as a joke. The gym laughed until Keanu actually showed up. But instead of throwing a punch, he said 7 words that changed everyone's life. What happened next left the entire room in stunned silence. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Marcus Rodriguez had always known how to command attention. At 32, he was a third-degree black belt, owner of the Dragonfire Martial Arts Academy in Austin, Texas, and a rising social media figure with over 800,000 followers across platforms. His online brand was built on strength, discipline, and a little bit of provocation. But none of his videos had gone as viral as the one filmed on an otherwise ordinary Thursday night. The gym had just wrapped its adult sparring class. Music played through the overhead speakers as students lingered to stretch, chat, and pose for selfies. One of Marcus's assistants, Diego, held up a phone and called out, "Let's shoot something spicy for TikTok. You know, something that'll pop." Marcus grinned and stepped into the center of the mat, sweat still clinging to his neck from the last round. He gave the camera a sideways glance and said, "You ever notice how Hollywood makes martial arts look easy?" A few people chuckled. He rolled his shoulders, loosened his stance, then launched into a sharp impersonation of John Wick-style gun fugue. Dramatic dodges, finger gun shooting stances, exaggerated rolls. The crowd laughed louder this time. He dropped into a mock serious pose and stared straight into the lens. "Keanu Reeves," he said slowly, as if summoning him by name. "Anytime, any place. I'll go easy on you." The gym erupted with laughter. One of the teens shouted, "Oh man, you're gonna get canceled." Someone else chimed in, "He's gonna come through that door like John Wick for real." Marcus laughed along, lifting his hands in mock surrender. "I'm just saying, we've got an open mat." Later that night, Diego posted the clip to TikTok with the caption, "Local black belt calls out John Wick himself." Within 12 hours, it had over 200,000 views. Within 3 days, it crossed 5 million. And that's when the tone started to change. The comment section filled with everything from admiration to outrage. Some called it gutsy, others called it stupid. MMA fighters reposted it with their own reactions. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. One celebrity trainer stitched it and said, "This guy better be ready if Keanu ever sees this." But the thing no one knew, not yet, was that Keanu Reeves did see it. He was in Los Angeles that week visiting a children's cancer center. Between rooms, a nurse showed him the clip on her phone, laughing as she said, "Even black belts are coming for you now." Keanu watched the clip silently. He didn't laugh. He handed the phone back and nodded quietly. That evening, he asked his assistant to find out everything they could about Marcus Rodriguez, Dragonfire Academy, and how soon they could clear 3 days from his schedule. Not for a fight, but for something more important. 3 days later, Marcus received a short, unexpected email in his inbox. No subject line, no introduction. Just one line. "I accept your invitation. Let's meet." Marcus stared at the email on his laptop screen, reading it over and over again, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something more logical. He leaned back in his office chair, half laughing and half in disbelief. "This has to be a prank," he muttered. "No way." He checked the sender. It came from an address managed by a well-known talent agency in Los Angeles, one often connected to high-profitable film clients. It wasn't a Gmail prank. It was real. "Let's meet." That was all it said. Marcus stood and paced across the office, a growing storm of anxiety rising in his chest. The call-out video had been a joke. He hadn't expected Keanu Reeves to even notice it, much less respond. It wasn't supposed to get this far. It was supposed to be entertaining, not real. He called Sophia into the room. She was his girlfriend and the gym's program coordinator. When he showed her the email, she didn't laugh. She looked at him carefully. "You okay?" "I don't know," he said. "It was just a joke, Soph. I didn't actually think he'd respond." "Well, he did," she said. "So what now?" Marcus didn't know. He was used to being in control. In the gym, he was the teacher, the leader, the alpha. But this turned everything upside down. If Keanu really came, what did that mean? Was he coming for an actual spar? A publicity event? A warning? 2 hours later, the second email arrived. This time, it was from Keanu's assistant. It confirmed the original message and proposed a time. Keanu Reeves would arrive at Dragonfire Academy the following Tuesday at noon. No press, no entourage, no film crew, just him. And he requested the meeting be private. By the next morning, Marcus's nerves had shifted into overdrive. Word had leaked to a few students, Diego among them, and speculation began swirling. Diego wanted to prepare cameras, a lighting setup, maybe even charge for admission. "No," Marcus said firmly. "No cameras, no tickets. If he's coming, we treat him like any other guest." But deep down, Marcus wasn't sure how to feel. Keanu Reeves was a household name. He was John Wick, Neo, a cultural icon, and somehow Marcus had turned himself into the guy who challenged him to a fight, on video, for the world to see. He tried to rehearse what he'd say. Something humble? Something tough? Should he apologize? Should he double down? None of it felt right. Tuesday came fast. The gym was unusually quiet. No music played. Classes were canceled. Marcus stood in the center of the mat, trying not to pace, trying not to sweat. At 11:58 a.m., the front door opened, and Keanu Reeves walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit or sunglasses, just jeans, a dark hoodie, and that unmistakable calm presence that felt larger than life. He looked around the gym, then nodded at Marcus with a faint, unreadable smile. "Hi, Marcus," he said. "Thanks for having me." Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like the student instead of the master. He nodded awkwardly and extended his hand. Keanu shook it with a quiet grip, not forceful, not performative, just present. That alone disarmed Marcus more than any punch could have. "Thanks for coming," Marcus finally managed to say. Keanu glanced around at the rows of punching bags, sparring gear, the dojo flags hanging from the rafters. "I watched some of your classes online," he said. "You're good with the kids." Marcus blinked, unsure how to respond. "I appreciate that." There was an awkward silence. Marcus gestured toward the office. "Do you want to talk in private?" Keanu smiled slightly. "I didn't come to talk, Marcus. I came to train. Train, not fight, not argue, not confront. Train." "Okay," Marcus said, clearing his throat. "Let's start with warm-ups." They stretched side by side in silence. The gym floor felt different now. Normally a place of control and rhythm, today it felt uncertain. Keanu moved with surprising fluidity, every stretch, every breath, precise and controlled. But he wasn't showing off, he was grounding himself. As they moved into light drills, Marcus noticed something else. Keanu didn't lead, didn't dominate. He mirrored. He followed Marcus's pace, subtly offering openings, giving him space. It wasn't submission, it was presence. He was listening with his body. Marcus tried to up the intensity, half to test him, half to reassert his authority. But Keanu absorbed every move calmly. He never countered aggressively, just flowed. After a while, Marcus stepped back, breathing hard. "You really meant it, didn't you? You didn't come here to fight." Keanu stood, brushing a palm across his knee. "I don't fight unless I have to. But I do show up when someone's hurting." Marcus stiffened. "I'm not hurting." Keanu didn't flinch. He just nodded softly, as if he'd heard the lie before. The weight of it hung in the air. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the encounter, not because Keanu embarrassed him or bested him, but because he didn't try to. There was no ego, no performance, just depth. And that shook Marcus more than any punch could have. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, remembering how loud the gym had been when he made the call-out video, how easy it had been to win laughs, and how quickly all of it unraveled the moment the person he mocked walked in, without anger, without fanfare, and stood in front of him like a mirror he wasn't ready to look into. 3 days later, Keanu returned again. Same time. No cameras, no announcement. And again the next week. It was becoming something different now. Not a stunt, not a joke, and definitely not a fight, but a reckoning Marcus hadn't seen coming. And he had no idea just how far it was going to go. Marcus kept expecting a camera crew to walk in behind Keanu, or a hidden mic to pop out from under his hoodie. Something, anything that would explain what was happening in a way that made sense. But there was nothing. Just Keanu Reeves standing calmly in the center of Dragonfire Academy, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. A dozen students were still scattered across the gym that afternoon, mostly adults cooling down after class. The moment they realized who had walked in, everything froze. Conversations died. The sound of jump ropes and punching bags fell away. Even the music from the speaker was abruptly shut off by one of the teens near the desk. A collective whisper passed through the room like electricity. "Is that's really him? No way." Keanu didn't acknowledge the whispers. He gave a small nod toward the group and turned his focus back to Marcus. His tone was gentle but deliberate. Using the script, "Consider, I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm here to understand." Marcus blinked. "Understand what?" "What you're trying to teach," Keanu replied. Ha! Cameras came out, phones tilted upward. People tried to discreetly film from behind gym bags, but Keanu held up a hand. Not angry, not commanding, just firm. "I'd like to keep this off social media." Most of the members paused, then slowly lowered their phones. A kind of reverence filled the room. Marcus stood frozen, trying to read between the lines. His ego wanted to crack a joke, light in the air, so he did. "Well," he said with a smirk, "if you're here to understand what I teach, I guess you'd better start with our new student intro raid." A few polite chuckles from the back. Keanu smiled slightly. "No need. I won't take up much of your time. Just wanted to ask if I could train with you. Quietly. 1 week. No press. Just you and me." Marcus stared at him. 1 week? This wasn't what he expected. He thought Keanu might come in to make a public statement, maybe settle the viral video tension with a photo op or some mutual laughs. But this felt more serious, more human. "You're serious?" Marcus asked. "I am," Keanu said. "I don't want to make a spectacle of anything. I just want to understand why you challenged me, what you were trying to show people, and maybe, through training together, we can both learn something." Marcus glanced around the gym. Everyone was watching now, but no one was speaking. He could feel the room holding its breath. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. Every instinct inside him screamed to take control of the situation, to steer the narrative back toward something familiar. But Keanu's presence had thrown a wrench into the rhythm of his carefully built world. He wasn't trying to one-up Marcus. He wasn't trying to embarrass him. He was doing something far more difficult. He was listening, and that, somehow, was even more disarming. "I mean," Marcus finally said, searching for words, "I don't usually train with outsiders, especially not on such short notice." Keanu nodded. "Of course, I understand. I don't want to disrupt your gym." Marcus expected him to argue, or at least push a little, but Keanu didn't. He simply stood there, open, calm, waiting. not for a performance, but for an honest response. Sophia, who had been standing near the doorway the whole time, stepped closer. "You should do it," she said under her breath. Marcus turned to her. "Why?" "Because everyone's watching. Not just in here. Online. In this city. And maybe," she added softly, "because he's not the one who needs this most. You are." That stung, not because she was wrong, but because she said it with love. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Okay. 1 week." Keanu bowed his head slightly in thanks. "I'll be here tomorrow. Noon?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "Noon." As Keanu turned to leave, the room parted around him like water. People stared, whispered, but no one interrupted. There was something sacred in the way he moved. Quiet, deliberate, respectful. He exited without another word. The moment the door shut, the room erupted. "Dude, that was insane. Keanu Reeves in this gym? Bro, are you seriously training with him?" Marcus held up his hands. "No interviews, no TikToks. Just let this happen." The rest of the day passed in a fog. Marcus couldn't focus through the kids' class. He forgot the warm-up sequence for the teen group. Even during evening sparring, his rhythm felt off. His thoughts kept circling the same unanswerable question. Why did Keanu come? He wasn't here for a fight. He wasn't here to make peace. He was here to learn. That thought unsettled Marcus more than he could admit. What did someone like Keanu Reeves have to learn from him? And why did that make him feel more exposed than any punch ever could? He tried to shake it off, but something had shifted. The air inside Dragonfire Academy felt different now. Tomorrow, he wouldn't be the center of attention anymore. And maybe, for the first time, that was a good thing. The next morning, Marcus arrived early. Too early. He vacuumed the mat twice, adjusted the framed calligraphy scroll 3 times, and triple-checked the first aid kit for no reason at all. The gym was spotless, but his nerves weren't. By 11:45, IMO, he had already changed into a fresh gi. He paced the lobby like it was a waiting room before a court date. He couldn't stop wondering what Keanu's real motive was. No cameras, no promotion, no contracts. Just training? It felt too quiet. At exactly 12:00 p.m., the door opened. Keanu walked in again, just as calm, just as simple. Jeans, a dark gray t-shirt, a canvas duffel over one shoulder. He nodded toward Marcus. "Good afternoon." "Hey," Marcus replied more quietly than he meant to. "You ready?" Keanu smiled. "Always." They trained for an hour. No drills, no showmanship, just movement. Controlled strikes, centering stances, partnered balances. Marcus kept waiting for Keanu to slip, to reveal the Hollywood in him. But he never did. He moved with humility. He asked questions. He listened more than he spoke. After they bowed and parted for the day, Keanu reached for his bag, then paused. "You know," he said softly, "I didn't come here to prove anything. But I think you did." Marcus didn't respond, not right away, because the truth was starting to crack open inside him. His joke challenge had been designed to lift himself up at someone else's expense. But Keanu hadn't returned the favor. He hadn't met ego with ego. He met it with presence. The next day, Keanu came again. And the day after that. No audience, no applause. Just sweat, silence, and mutual rhythm. On the 3rd day, after a particularly intense round of partner forms, Marcus sat down on the mat, breathing heavily. Keanu lowered himself across from him, not saying a word. Marcus finally broke the silence. "What are you trying to see in me?" Keanu looked him in the eye. Not see, understand. "Wes?" "Because people who make noise usually have something inside they haven't made peace with. I used to be like that." Marcus looked down. For once, he didn't feel like defending himself. Keanu stood, bowed once, and quietly left. That night, Marcus sat in the office long after the gym closed. The lights were dim, his students were gone. The viral fame that had once felt like power now felt hollow. For the first time, he asked himself a question he'd avoided for years. Why had he really mocked Keanu Reeves? And what was he so afraid people would see if he stopped performing? He didn't have the answers yet, but he knew he wasn't ready to stop showing up, because something inside him had already started to change. Keanu showed up every day at noon, just as he said he would. No delay, no entourage, no press. He brought his own water, rolled out his own mat, and trained like someone who had nothing to prove. There was no small talk, no backslaps, no flexing, just presence. Marcus noticed how quiet he was, not withdrawn, just intentional. Keanu moved like someone who had been through fire and learned to walk without making noise. He never gave unsolicited advice. He never corrected anyone. But somehow, even the younger students started watching him more closely. They noticed how he bowed before stepping on the mat, how he picked up towels without being asked, how he thanked the instructors after class, even though he was the most famous person in the room. By the end of the week, the energy in the gym had shifted. No one said it out loud, but things felt calmer, more grounded. The kids laughed less nervously. The adults sparred more thoughtfully. It was as if Keanu's quiet way of moving had become contagious. One afternoon, after the kids' class wrapped up, Marcus was wiping down a bench when he caught something unusual. Keanu was crouched beside a boy named Trevor, one of the newer students. Trevor had struggled with anxiety since the first day, often freezing up mid-drill or crying in the locker room. But today, Keanu was sitting beside him, not lecturing, not encouraging, just sitting. After a long pause, Trevor said something, and Keanu nodded, never breaking eye contact. Then they stood together, bowed and walked toward the exit. Later that evening, Trevor's mother pulled Marcus aside. Her eyes were full. I don't know what Mr. Reeves said to him, but Trevor's never walked out of class smiling before. He said he felt seen today. Marcus didn't know how to respond. He hadn't even noticed Keanu speak. The next day, the pattern repeated. After training, Keanu helped Diego stack pads, tied a younger student's shoe, then left without a word. That was his rhythm. Enter quiet, train hard, listen deeply, leave soft. Marcus tried to keep his own composure, but something was stirring inside him. For years, he had built Dragonfire Academy on grit and drive, on pushing limits and proving strength. But now, Keanu was showing something else. Not softer, not weaker, just different. And people were responding to it. Even Sophia noticed. That evening, while closing the front desk, she turned to Marcus with a half smile. You've been different lately. How so? You're not pacing the floor like you usually do. You're listening more, less edge. Marcus didn't know if that was a compliment or a warning. He only knew one thing. Whatever Keanu was doing here, it was working. On the 5th day of training, something happened that Marcus couldn't explain. During a light contact drill, he made a small mistake, an off-balance step, and Keanu, without a word, shifted his own footing to match. He mirrored Marcus's error, resetting the rhythm so the flow wouldn't break. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Marcus noticed. He said nothing at first, but later in the changing room, he found himself standing at the mirror, staring at his own reflection and asking silently, why would he do that? That question kept looping in his head. For Marcus, training had always been about perfection, precision, performance. If you messed up, you fixed it. If someone else messed up, you corrected them. That's how the standard was upheld. That's how excellence was earned. But Keanu didn't correct. He adjusted. Without judgment, without hesitation. As if Marcus's mistake wasn't something to be fixed, but something to be understood. It made Marcus uncomfortable. That night, he scrolled through his old videos. One after another, clips of himself breaking boards, disarming opponents, walking through cheering crowds after black belt ceremonies. But now, for the first time, something felt hollow in the background applause. He pulled up the clip, the one that started it all, his John Wick parody, the crowd's laughter, the moment he pointed at the camera and called out Keanu's name like it was some kind of punchline. At the time, it had felt powerful. Now it just felt loud. The next day, Keanu arrived 15 minutes early. Instead of stretching, he swept the front lobby with a broom he found in the supply closet. When Marcus spotted him, he said, "You don't have to do that." "I know," Keanu said simply. He didn't stop. Sophia watched the whole thing and leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "I don't get it," Marcus whispered to her. "Why is he doing this?" Sophia smiled faintly. "Because it's who he is." Marcus wasn't convinced. Nobody that famous shows up 5 days in a row just to train. Not without cameras, not without something to promote. "Maybe he's not here to be seen," she said. "Maybe he's here to see you." The words hit harder than he expected. After Keanu left that afternoon, Diego approached Marcus in private. "Hey, this might sound weird, but I talked to Keanu for like 5 minutes today. Just me and him. Told him about my dad and how he used to pressure me to be perfect. And Keanu just nodded and said, 'That must have been heavy to carry.'" Marcus looked at him. "And?" Diego shrugged. "No one's ever said that before. Not like that." Marcus felt a strange twist in his chest. It wasn't about Keanu's technique anymore. It was about something deeper. Something Marcus didn't have words for yet. By the end of the week, Keanu had trained 6 times with Marcus, spoken only when necessary, and yet somehow had more impact on the gym than any celebrity endorsement ever could. Members were showing up early just to sit quietly before class. Students were bowing more intentionally. Even the chatter in the locker rooms had softened. The atmosphere felt less like a dojo and more like a sanctuary. Marcus didn't understand it. He had spent years curating a brand built on energy and dominance, loud moments and viral clips. But now the most talked about person in his gym was the one who said the least. It left Marcus with questions he didn't know how to ask. During Saturday's teen class, he watched from the sidelines as Keanu ran warm-ups for the younger belts. They moved slowly through breathing exercises and body control drills, nothing flashy. Yet the kids hung on every move. When one of them stumbled, Keanu didn't correct with a shout or a bark. He knelt beside him, demonstrated the move again, and waited. The boy tried once more, and this time nailed it. That night, Sophia met Marcus in the office after closing. She placed a cup of tea on his desk and sat across from him, watching him with quiet curiosity. "You haven't said much about him," she said. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "I don't know what to say." "What do you mean?" "I mean, he's not doing anything special, he's just here. But it's like his being here is changing everything, changing me." Sophia leaned forward. "Because it is special. He's showing up without armor. That's not weakness, Marcus. That's strength most people never reach." Marcus rubbed his hands together. "But why here? Why me?" I mocked him. "I made him the butt of a joke." Sophia's voice was soft. "Maybe he knows what it's like to be the butt of a joke. Maybe he came not to fight you, but to find you." Marcus looked at her. "Find me? The real you, the one who doesn't need to perform, the one who used to teach kids to be brave, not brutal." He looked down at his hands, hands that had taught hundreds how to strike, but not always how to feel safe. He whispered, "I don't know if I can get back to that." "You don't have to," she said gently. "He's already helping you forward." Marcus sat in silence for a long moment. Then he asked the question that had been building inside him since the moment Keanu stepped onto his mat. What is he really doing here? Sophia didn't answer, because maybe that answer wasn't meant to be given. Maybe it was meant to be lived into. And tomorrow, Keanu would return again, It started with a missed block. Nothing dramatic, just a small slip in timing. Marcus stepped left when he should have shifted right, leaving his side briefly open. Keanu noticed it, of course he did, but didn't take advantage. He simply reset the drill and waited for Marcus to regain control. That was the trigger. Something in Marcus snapped. They had been sparring for 15 minutes in front of the adult class, and Marcus had been holding back, trying to match Keanu's quiet rhythm. But that slip, that pause, it pulled up something old, a memory, a frustration, a need. Without thinking, Marcus threw a hard, low kick, faster and heavier than what was appropriate for a controlled match. Keanu absorbed it, his body shifting to neutralize the blow. He didn't retaliate. Marcus followed up with a sharp back fist, then another. Keanu blocked the first but let the second land. It tapped his chest and pushed him slightly off balance. Still, he didn't strike back. The gym grew quieter. The students circled around the mat had stopped their own drills. One by one, they turned to watch. Marcus kept going, a flurry of strikes, a combination too aggressive for what had started as light contact. Keanu moved like water, never striking back, never escalating. He dodged when he needed to. He took the hits when he didn't. Until Marcus shoved him backward, breath heaving, fists clenched. "You're not even trying," he shouted. Keanu stood still. "You think you're better than us?" Marcus demanded. "Better than me? Walking in here like some monk, all quiet and gentle? Like that makes you strong?" The employee who dared to shut him. He didn't flinch. "I'm sick of it," Marcus snapped. "You're not helping me, you're humiliating me." Keanu looked at him, eyes steady. His voice was calm. "I used to think like you," he said, "until someone helped me unlearn it." Marcus blinked. Keanu took one step forward, extended his hand, and helped Marcus to his feet, though Marcus hadn't even realized he had fallen to one knee during the last exchange. Then Keanu bowed politely, turned his back, and walked off the mat. No anger, no drama, just silence. The students didn't move. Even Diego, who usually found something funny to say in tense moments, stayed quiet. The air felt heavier than any black belt test Marcus had ever administered. Sophia, standing near the desk, said nothing. Her eyes followed Keanu as he picked up his bag and exited the gym. The door closed behind him, and all that remained was the echo of the moment Marcus finally broke. Marcus remained standing in the center of the mat, breath shallow, sweat sliding down the side of his face. The room still hadn't moved. It was as if everyone was waiting for permission to react, unsure if what they had just seen was a breakdown or a breakthrough. He could feel their eyes on him, not with judgment, not yet, but with uncertainty. They didn't know whether to approach, to offer support, or to keep their distance. That ambiguity cut deeper than any disapproval. He turned toward Diego, who looked like he wanted to say something but thought better of it. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came. Not an explanation, not a joke, not even an order. Sophia was the one who stepped forward. "I think class is over for today," she said gently, glancing at the students. "Thank you, everyone. Let's give Marcus some space." Nobody argued. The students began gathering their gear in silence. Even the teens who normally dragged their feet left quickly. The room emptied faster than Marcus had ever seen. Within 10 minutes, it was just him and Sophia left in the gym. She didn't speak right away. She just stood beside him, not looking directly at him, but facing the mat as he did. Finally, Marcus asked, "Was I wrong?" Sophia didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "I don't think he came here to win. I think he came here to lose something." Marcus turned to her, confused. "What does that mean?" "I think," she said slowly, "he came here to let go of something inside himself, and maybe he hoped you would too." Marcus sat down on the mat, hard. His body felt heavy. His hands trembled slightly. "I lost it," he muttered, I lost control. I attacked him. He didn't fight back, Sophia. He just took it. Ugh. Yeah, she said quietly. He did. Wait, Mike? She sat beside him, folding her legs neatly. Maybe because that's what someone once did for him, she said. Maybe someone once let him lash out and stayed kind anyway. Maybe he thought that was the only way you'd ever feel safe enough to let your guard down. Marcus covered his face with both hands. I feel like an idiot. You're not, she said. You're just not done learning yet. He laughed bitterly through his palms. That obvious? Sophia smiled softly. Only to someone who loves you. Marcus dropped his hands and stared up at the ceiling. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of questions, full of things he didn't yet have the courage to say. What haunted him most wasn't the fact that he had lost his temper in front of his students. It was the fact that Keanu had seen through him the whole time, and still chose not to fight back. That night, Marcus stayed at the gym long after Sophia had gone home. He didn't turn on any lights, just sat alone on the mat with the hum of the vending machine in the background and the occasional buzz from a forgotten phone charger near the front desk. His body ached from the sparring, but not as much as his pride. He kept replaying it in his head, every moment, every word, every strike, the look in Keanu's eyes, not anger, not pity, but recognition. Like he knew this version of Marcus already, like he had been him once. And that simple line kept echoing. I used to think like you, until someone helped me unlearn it. Unlearn it. Marcus had spent his entire adult life building himself into someone untouchable. He wore black belts like armor. He turned every insecurity into another repetition, another hour on the bag, another victory in the ring. But now, with one sentence and one act of restraint, Keanu had shattered the illusion. Marcus hadn't been the stronger fighter that day. He had been the louder one, the more desperate one. And Keanu had responded not with force, but with compassion. It was unbearable and beautiful at the same time. The next morning, Marcus stood in front of the mirror in the locker room, looking at his reflection as if seeing it for the first time. He looked tired, hollow-eyed, but something had softened in his face, a vulnerability he didn't recognize, or maybe had forgotten. He walked onto the mat that day unsure of what would happen. Keanu didn't show up. No call, no message, no explanation. And somehow that hurt more than if he'd come to confront Marcus again. He made it through the day mechanically, teaching drills, correcting stances, smiling where he was supposed to, but everything felt wrong, like the color had been drained from the walls. At the end of the kids' class, Tommy Chen, one of his youngest students, tugged on his sleeve. Are you okay, Master Marcus? Marcus looked down at him, startled. Why do you ask? Because you look like when my mom cries but tries not to. The words hit him like a punch he didn't block. He knelt down slowly. I'm okay, Tommy, he said. Just learning something new. Tommy nodded solemnly. Learning is hard. Yeah, Marcus whispered. It really is. That night he wrote an email. Not long, not dramatic. Just 6 words. I wasn't ready, but I'm trying. He read it twice, then hit send. To Keanu. And this time, he didn't expect a reply. Because maybe the reply wasn't the point. Maybe the point was to stop pretending he didn't care and start learning how to. Marcus couldn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every blink of his eyes pulling up another scene, another second of what had happened on the mat. The sound of his own voice shouting at Keanu rang in his ears like an echo that refused to fade. You're not even trying. You think you're better than us? You're humiliating me. The words didn't feel like his anymore, but he knew they were. And worse, he knew they didn't come from Keanu's presence. They had come from somewhere much deeper, somewhere much older. He got up sometime around 3 in the morning and walked barefoot into the living room. The hardwood was cool against his skin. He sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, head in his hands, trying to make sense of what he was feeling. He thought about the first time he ever stepped into a martial arts studio. He had been 9, small for his age, scared, quiet. His mom had enrolled him after he came home with a black eye for the 3rd time in a month. And there had been 3 boys, older, louder, meaner. They cornered him in the alley behind school and called him names he didn't understand until years later. They didn't stop until he stopped crying. That was their measure of victory. Tears. Martial arts became a way out, a way to build something that couldn't be broken. He trained like his life depended on it, because in his mind, it did. If he was strong enough, fast enough, intimidating enough, maybe the pain would stay away. But it didn't. It just hid beneath new layers. The dojo trophies, the ripped abs, the online followers. All of it was armor. And last night, Keanu had walked past all of it like it was made of paper. He sat there, in the silence of the living room, until he heard the creak of the hallway floorboards. Sophia appeared in the doorway, her robe tied loosely around her waist, eyes soft but clear. "You're not okay," she said gently. Marcus nodded. "No." She walked over and sat beside him. He didn't speak. Neither did she. They just sat, the kind of silence that only comes between people who've run out of masks to wear. After a while, Sophia finally asked, "Why are you so afraid of being seen?" Marcus didn't answer right away, because the real answer scared him. He whispered, "Because I don't know if I'd like what they'd see." Sophia placed a hand on his back. "I think you'd be surprised." Marcus leaned back into the couch, his breath shaky, like he had just finished a sparring round that had nothing to do with fists. For so long he had measured his worth by how untouchable he appeared. But Keanu hadn't cared about that. He hadn't tried to outdo Marcus, or beat him, or embarrass him. He just stood there, calm, steady, present. And somehow that hurt more than if he'd fought back. "I keep thinking about what he said," Marcus murmured, "that someone helped him unlearn it." "Unlearn what?" Sophia asked. "The need to win everything, the need to be in control, the need to never show weakness." He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had thrown punches for 20 years. "I've spent my whole life trying to outrun that scared kid I used to be. And I guess I never actually stopped being him. I just got better at hiding it." Sophia was quiet for a moment, then she said, "Keanu didn't show up here to teach you how to fight. He showed up to help you stop fighting yourself." Marcus closed his eyes. "He should hate me. But he doesn't," she said softly. "That's what's making this so hard, isn't it? He saw the worst in you, and he didn't punish you for it. He gave you compassion instead." Marcus nodded slowly. "And I didn't know what to do with it." He stood up and started pacing the room. The weight of shame hadn't gone away, it had just crystallized into clarity. And now it was demanding something of him. "I have to apologize," he said. Sophia stood too. "Then do it." "But how?" He didn't leave a number. No one's heard from him since he walked out. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "You think he booked a private jet back to LA in the middle of the night? He's probably still at that hotel downtown. You said his assistant mentioned it in the confirmation email?" Marcus stared at her. "You think I should just show up?" "I think if someone changed your life by not hitting you back when they could have, then yeah, you show up." He hesitated. "What if he doesn't want to see me?" "Then you'll know," she said. "But at least you'll be able to look in the mirror tomorrow and know you didn't hide from this." Marcus glanced at the clock. It was nearly 6 in the morning. The sun had barely started to rise. He walked to the hallway, grabbed his gym bag, and started changing into clean clothes. He didn't know what he was going to say yet. He just knew he couldn't stay silent anymore. The hotel wasn't far, 10 minutes from his apartment, just past the downtown bridge. Marcus parked on the street, heart pounding as he stared up at the modest boutique hotel where Keanu had said he'd be staying. The sun was beginning to rise, the sky streaked with soft orange and gray, but the air felt heavy, like it was holding its breath with him. He walked through the glass doors, his gym bag slung over one shoulder, unsure of what he'd say once he got inside. The front desk attendant looked up, startled. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quickly. "I'm not here for a room. I'm looking for a guest. Keanu Reeves." The clerk's eyes widened slightly but remained composed. "Mr. Reeves requested privacy." "I'm not sure." Marcus nodded. "I get it. Could you just give him a message?" The clerk hesitated, then reached for a notepad. "Sure. What would you like me to write?" Marcus paused, searching his chest for the words. What could he possibly say that wouldn't sound small or rehearsed? After a moment, he took the pen himself and wrote something down. Folded the note. Slid it across the counter. "Could you give this to him directly?" he asked. The clerk nodded. "I'll make sure he gets it." Marcus turned to leave, but before he reached the door, a voice called softly from behind him. "You didn't have to write it down." Marcus froze. He turned around slowly. Keanu stood in the doorway to the elevator, dressed simply in a t-shirt and black track pants. He looked like he had just come from the gym or was on his way. His expression was calm, unreadable, but there was no anger in it, only curiosity. Marcus swallowed hard. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me." Keanu stepped closer, hands in his pockets. "I figured you might show up." Marcus laughed, once, breathless. "Of course you did." There was a long silence between them. Then Marcus said, "I'm sorry for everything, the video, the fight, the yelling. I didn't know how to handle what you were showing me." "I know," Keanu said gently. "I didn't expect compassion." "I didn't either," Keanu admitted. "Not for a long time." Marcus looked down. "I thought I was strong. I built my whole life on that idea. But what you did?" Standing there, letting me come unglued without retaliating. It made me feel small, but also like maybe there was a better way to be strong. Keanu nodded once. "That's what someone once showed me." Marcus met his eyes. "Would you teach me?" Keanu didn't smile, not exactly, but something in his face softened. "I think you're already learning." Keanu led Marcus into the small cafe attached to the hotel lobby. It was still early, mostly empty, just the quiet hum of an espresso machine and the soft clinking of cups behind the counter. They chose a booth near the back, away from the windows. No one approached them. No one seemed to even notice. It felt like the world had carved out a space just for them to talk. For a while they sat in silence. Keanu stirred his tea slowly, eyes on the swirling liquid. Then he said, "You asked me to teach you, but there's not much I can teach you until you know where I'm coming from." Marcus nodded. "Okay. I used to think strength was about endurance," Keanu said, "about how much I could carry without breaking. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I kept moving, kept working, I could outrun everything that hurt." Marcus didn't interrupt. He listened. Keanu's voice remained steady, but there was a weight behind it, not dramatic, just deeply lived in. "I lost my best friend when I was 23, he said. "River. He was like a brother to me. We had just started our careers, just figuring out who we were. Then he was gone, just like that." Marcus had heard about River Phoenix. Everyone had. But hearing Keanu say his name so quietly, like a wound that had never quite closed, made it real in a different way. "After that," Keanu continued, "I kept going. I did more movies, more training, more traveling. But I never really grieved. I didn't think I was allowed to. I thought grief was weakness. I thought talking about pain made you a burden." He paused, then looked at Marcus. "You ever feel that way?" Marcus nodded. "All the time." Keanu looked back down. A few years later, I lost my daughter, stillborn. And then, her mother, Jennifer. We were working on things. It was complicated, but I loved her. And just like River, she was gone too. Marcus felt the breath catch in his throat. He hadn't known all the details. He'd heard whispers, stories, but nothing like this. Not this close, not this raw. Keanu kept his voice calm, but his eyes shimmered with something deeper than sadness. After that, I disappeared a bit. I became quiet, stoic. Everyone called it strength, said I was humble, peaceful. But really, I was hiding. He placed the spoon down beside the cup. Strength isn't hiding pain, he said. It's having the courage to feel it without letting it consume you. Marcus sat still, his elbows on the table, hands loosely folded. He didn't know how to respond. He'd expected to hear something inspirational, maybe philosophical. But this wasn't that. It wasn't a lesson. It was a man quietly laying his grief on the table, like a scar he no longer needed to hide. Keanu let the silence breathe for a while before continuing. People think I'm peaceful because I'm enlightened, he said, almost with a trace of a smile. But it's not peace that came first. It was numbness. Peace came much later, after I learned to stop pretending I didn't care. Marcus nodded slowly. I do that too. The pretending. I know, Keanu said gently. That's why I came. Marcus looked up, surprised. You came? For me? Keanu nodded once. When I saw the video, I didn't feel offended. I felt familiar. I saw a man trying to be seen without having to be vulnerable. I know what that looks like. I was that man for a long time. Marcus's throat tightened. He swallowed and leaned back in the booth, struggling to hold his composure. I thought if I challenged someone bigger than me, more famous than me, Marcus said quietly, it would make people take me seriously. I thought maybe it would make me feel like I mattered. Keanu looked at him with the softest expression Marcus had ever seen on another man's face. You already matter, he said. You didn't need to fight me to prove that. Marcus exhaled slowly, like something was deflating inside him. I didn't expect you to be like this, he admitted. I thought you'd either ignore me or come to put me in my place. But you just kept showing up, Keanu nodded. Because I know how powerful it can be when someone shows up for you without needing anything back. He leaned forward slightly. You don't need to beat me to be seen. You need to see yourself. That's where it starts. Those words landed like a weight that somehow felt light. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. An ache, yes, but a clean one. The kind that signaled healing had begun. I've never let anyone talk to me like this, Marcus said, almost in awe of himself. Not Sophia, not my students, not even myself. It's because most people don't feel safe enough to be seen, Keanu said. So they build walls, master titles, followers, muscles. The louder you get, the less anyone can hear what you're really trying to say. Marcus looked down. What if I don't like what I find when I start seeing myself? Keanu's answer was simple. You will. Marcus sat with that answer, his eyes fixed on the table, his breath unsteady. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a teacher or a fighter or someone who had to hold it all together. He just felt like a person. One who was being seen not for what he could do, but for who he was beneath all of it. Keanu leaned back, letting the weight of the conversation settle. The truth is, he said, there are no finish lines in healing. You don't reach a point where everything is fixed. You just learn how to stop abandoning yourself. Marcus looked at him, something tender beginning to rise behind his tired eyes. And what about the people who expect me to always be strong? What happens when I stop pretending for them? Keanu's gaze was steady. Some of them will leave. Some won't understand. But the ones who matter, the ones who see you, They'll stay, and they'll love you more for it. The words cut clean through every layer Marcus had built to protect himself. He thought of Sophia. He thought of his students. He thought of that quiet moment with Tommy Chen when a child had asked, "Are you okay?" and he hadn't known how to answer. "I don't know how to be that kind of strong," Marcus whispered. "You do," Keanu said. "You just haven't practiced it yet." Another silence passed, but this one felt peaceful. It wasn't the silence of tension, but the kind that follows truth. After a while, Keanu stood. "I should go. I've got a flight back to LA this afternoon." Marcus stood too, almost instinctively. "You're leaving?" Keanu nodded. "My part's done." "But—" Marcus hesitated, his voice catching in his throat. "What if I'm not finished?" Keanu smiled gently. "That's the beautiful part. You don't need me to keep going." Marcus looked away, blinking fast. "Thank you. For everything. For seeing me." Keanu placed a hand briefly on his shoulder. "Thank you for letting yourself be seen." They walked toward the lobby. Just before the doors opened, Marcus turned to him one last time. "Will I see you again?" Keanu paused, then said, "Probably not where you expect, but you'll start seeing the part of me I came to show you in yourself." Marcus stood at the glass doors long after Keanu had disappeared into the morning, and for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of what came next. Because the person he'd spent his whole life trying to become? He had just started to meet him. Marcus stood in front of the mirror, wrapping his hands in silence. The gym had emptied for the night, except for Sophia, who quietly swept near the entrance. Keanu was in the far corner, helping Eli adjust the straps on his training gloves. There was a strange calm in the air, as if something unspoken hovered just beneath the surface. After everything, after the public embarrassment, after the private apology, Marcus had one more thing to say. He walked slowly toward Keanu, who turned and met his eyes without flinching. "I have one more idea," Marcus said. Keanu didn't respond right away. He simply waited. "Not a fight, not a rematch, just one more session," Marcus continued, "in front of everyone, but this time we teach." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Teach?" "Yeah," Marcus said, his voice steadier than it had been in days. "Let's show them what real martial arts looks like. Not just moves, but what it means, what it stands for. You helped me remember that." Keanu studied him, then nodded. "On one condition. We do it together, side by side." A breath escaped from Marcus's chest, almost like relief. "Deal." Sophia, who had overheard from a distance, walked over, eyebrows raised. "You serious?" Marcus nodded. "Completely." She hesitated, then looked at Keanu. This could actually be beautiful." Keanu smiled. "Then let's make it so." The announcement went out the next morning. Sophia created a flyer and posted it to the gym's website and social pages. Special martial arts demonstration, strength, humility, legacy, with Marcus Lang and special guest instructor. No mention of Keanu's name, just the promise of something worth seeing. Word spread fast. By the end of the day, RSVPs had tripled the gym's capacity. Sophia scrambled to rearrange equipment and fold back the mats. She borrowed chairs from the community center next door. News stations began calling, asking if the Keanu Reeves fight rumors were true. She smiled and replied, "It's not a fight, it's something better." Marcus called his father that night for the first time in years, left a message. "You always said I was more show than heart. Maybe you were right. But if you're around, I'm doing something this weekend you might want to see." Keanu stayed quiet in the days leading up to it, but he showed up early each morning, trained in silence, and helped clean up after. He insisted on no special equipment, no fanfare, no bodyguards. "Let the energy speak for itself," he told Sophia. And it would, in ways no one expected. Saturday morning arrived with an edge in the air. One part anticipation, one part curiosity. Cars lined the street outside the gym. People spilled onto the sidewalk, murmuring about what they thought they were going to see. Some expected a fight. Others came just to catch a glimpse of Keanu Reeves, whose presence had now been confirmed by a photo someone snapped at the gym earlier in the week. By noon, Sophia had to open the back roll-up door to let in more light and more air. She had never seen the space like this, packed wall to wall with spectators, students, and strangers. Reporters clustered near the side, camera crews ready. The buzz was electric, but Keanu, dressed in a simple black gi with no belt, stood in a quiet corner with his eyes closed, breathing deep. Marcus walked out first, bowing at the edge of the mat. The crowd cheered, some standing, some recording on their phones. Then Keanu stepped onto the mat. The room didn't erupt. It fell still. He didn't look like a movie star. He looked like a man returning to something sacred. Marcus raised his hand, and the microphone cracked to life. Most of you know me. I've trained here for 7 years. I've won titles. I've broken boards. But a few weeks ago, I met someone who reminded me what I'd forgotten, that martial arts is not about dominance. It's about discipline, grace, and growth. Reitya, he turned to Keanu. This man. He could have embarrassed me. He could have walked away. Instead, he showed me what strength really looks like. He handed the microphone to Keanu. Keanu took a long breath, eyes sweeping the room. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. I came here to train quietly. I never expected to teach. But Marcus showed me something too, that pride can give way to humility, and that we're all students, no matter how old or how known we are. He looked at Eli, sitting cross-legged in the front row, his hands gripping his knees. Today, we're not here to fight. We're here to demonstrate. What we practice is more than technique. It's a language. And like any language, when spoken with the right intention, it can heal, not harm. Then he bowed. Together, they moved into position, mirror images of discipline. The room hushed completely. Their demonstration began not with action, but with stillness. The first movement was slow, deliberate. Marcus stepped forward with a palm strike, controlled, clean, no contact. Keanu mirrored the motion, receiving it with an open hand, redirecting the flow instead of resisting it. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the camera crews adjusted their equipment silently, instinctively sensing that this was not just a performance, it was a lesson. They moved in rhythm, trading techniques without ego. Keanu demonstrated classic Aikido redirection. Marcus answered with crisp jiu-jitsu transitions, grappling, sweeping, rolling, then pausing to explain. They weren't fighting. They were storytelling with their bodies. Marcus turned to the crowd and said, "Most people think this is about overpowering your opponent. But the best defense I've ever seen is what he did to me. He listened." That line landed like a bell in the room. Then came a moment no one expected. Keanu stepped back and gestured to the sideline. "Eli," he said gently, "come here." The boy looked at Sophia. She nodded, smiling, and nudged him forward. The crowd parted as he made his way to the mat, small and a bit shaky in his white gi. Keanu knelt beside him, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Eli's been practicing something. Would you like to show them?" Eli hesitated, then nodded. Keanu moved aside. Eli stood in the center of the mat, raised his arms, and began a basic kata. Awkward, stiff, but sincere. His balance wavered. A few people in the back chuckled, not maliciously, but unkindly enough to echo. Eli froze. Keanu walked behind him, didn't speak, just stood tall and moved with him. Slowly, the kata continued, now with both of them in sync. Keanu was not correcting him, he was amplifying him, giving him dignity in front of hundreds. The room changed. Phones lowered, mouths shut. By the time Eli bowed, even the reporters were clapping. Marcus stepped forward and bowed to the boy. "Best form I've seen today," he said, then gave him a fist bump. That single act unraveled every assumption people had walked in with. The demonstration continued, but the energy had shifted. No one was watching for a fight anymore. They were watching for the next moment of grace. The final sequence was a slow-motion sparring display between Keanu and Marcus. It wasn't choreographed. It was real flow. Testing, yielding, adapting. At the end, they locked arms and bowed deeply to each other. The gym erupted. Sophia wiped her eyes behind the front desk. Afterward, people came forward not to ask for autographs, but to thank them. One mother said her son was bullied, and seeing Keanu train alongside someone like Eli gave her hope. Another man, a veteran, told Marcus he hadn't seen that kind of humility in a dojo in years. News headlines the next day didn't say, "Keanu fights at local gym." They said, "Keanu teaches what real strength looks like." And Marcus? He didn't go viral, but he gained something else. Purpose. That night, he stayed late to clean the mats. Keanu joined him, both of them working in silence until the last light shut off. Keanu and Marcus stood at opposite ends of the mat once more, their bodies relaxed, but their eyes focused. They bowed, then stepped into a slow, synchronized movement. What they were doing wasn't a fight. It was a dance of opposites. Every shift of weight, every redirection of energy had a meaning behind it. Keanu moved forward with a light strike toward the shoulder. Marcus caught the motion and redirected it across his chest. Then Keanu stepped back, allowing Marcus to advance. They weren't trying to defeat each other. They were communicating through motion. Sophia handed Keanu a microphone mid-sequence. He caught it effortlessly, and while continuing the flow, he began to speak. "In martial arts, every movement is a conversation," he said. "This one," he swept his arm in a wide arc, "represents fear. Not the fear of being hurt, but the fear of not being seen. So we lash out." He caught Marcus's strike and turned it gently away. "And this is anger. Anger often looks strong, but it's brittle. If you meet it with more anger, it breaks both of you." Marcus stepped in and mimicked a blocking posture. He took the mic briefly. "For years, I thought strength meant invincibility, that I had to win, that I couldn't let anyone see weakness. But when you live like that, eventually the weight crushes you." They paused. Their breathing matched, even in stillness. Keanu looked around the room. "I'm not here to be the best fighter. That was never the point. When I was younger, I came to martial arts because I was full of noise, internal chaos. This," he raised his hands, palms open, "taught me how to listen to my own silence. And in that silence, I found peace." He handed the mic back to Marcus. Marcus slowly lowered into a kneeling position on the mat. His voice trembled slightly as he looked at Keanu. "I used to tell myself I wanted to be better than him, better than anyone in this gym. But that's not what I want anymore." He looked down, then back up, his voice clear now. "I want to be better than who I was." Silence followed. A kind of reverent silence, not because people didn't know what to say, but because the truth had already been spoken. Marcus remained kneeling for a moment longer. Keanu extended a hand, not as a celebrity, not as a superior, but as a peer. Marcus took it, and Keanu helped him to his feet. The crowd watched as the two men resumed the flow of motion, but now, each step carried new weight. This wasn't a performance. It was a reckoning. Keanu threw a slow kick, which Marcus intercepted and swept aside. Then Marcus attempted a shoulder grab, and Keanu turned with it, spinning out, letting the energy dissolve. Keanu raised his hand again for the microphone. "When I lost my daughter," he said, voice steady but heavy, "there was a rage inside me that nothing could reach. Not words, not roles, not the spotlight. I didn't need to be distracted. I needed to be rebuilt." He paused. "And, oddly enough, it was these movements, this language, That gave me the pieces. Marcus stood in front of him again. This time, his movements weren't sharp or fast. They were honest. I used to think people only respected winners, that you had to dominate a space to earn a place in it. But the truth is, no one can learn from someone who's always pretending to be perfect. He looked out at the crowd. If you're a young man here today trying to prove yourself, I want to say this. You don't have to fight everyone to be somebody. You just have to show up and tell the truth. Keanu turned to Marcus and raised an open palm. They struck together, gently, fist to palm, a gesture of mutual respect, echoing traditional discipline, but stripped of all pretense. Then Keanu did something unexpected. He stepped to the side of the mat, gestured toward a group of young students in the corner. "Come," he said softly. "Join us." 3 boys and 2 girls, all under the age of 12, walked forward nervously. They formed a semicircle in front of the 2 men. Keanu led them through a sequence of breath work and basic stances. Marcus followed, correcting posture with quiet encouragement. The room, packed with adults, stood silent as these children absorbed every instruction. The demonstration had turned into a shared ritual, an invitation to begin again, regardless of age, status, or skill. As the children completed their final movements and bowed, Keanu responded with a deeper bow, filled with humility. Then he turned to the crowd. His tone was even, reflective. We live in a world that rewards noise. It celebrates being right, being loud, being seen. But true strength doesn't scream. It listens. It waits. And when it moves with purpose. His words resonated with a different frequency than the martial arts demonstrations. It wasn't about form anymore. It was about presence, dignity, stillness. What Keanu gave wasn't instruction. It was a quiet call back to something deeper we forget in everyday life. Marcus stepped beside him, no longer the man who walked into the gym looking to prove something. "I was addicted to applause," he said, eyes scanning the room, "to proving myself, until I realized applause can't teach you anything. Silence does. Reflection does. That's what this space gave me." Keanu placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder and said softly, "And what you gave back today is something most people spend their whole lives searching for. You didn't just change, you showed us how." The room didn't erupt, it settled. People didn't cheer. They honored. With stillness, with breath. One child, maybe 6 or 7, stepped forward shyly. "Are you really a movie star?" he asked. Keanu knelt beside him, smiled gently, and said, "Sometimes. But today, I'm just your training partner." The boy grinned and hugged him without hesitation. Around them, people began clapping, not like fans cheering at a show, but as witnesses giving thanks. Sophia approached quietly. "You didn't just teach martial arts today," she said, her voice catching. "You taught dignity." Marcus nodded. "I finally stopped trying to win," he replied. And that's when everything started to make sense. Keanu gave a half smile. Funny how that works. For the first time, Marcus laughed. Not to impress, but because he meant it. The crowd had begun to thin, but a gentle energy still hung in the air. Keanu remained near the mat, answering quiet questions from parents and posing for a few respectful photos with students. Marcus stood off to the side, sipping water, watching the children practice a few of the movements they had learned. There was something grounding about the whole moment, like the room was no longer a gym, but a sanctuary. Then, from the front row of folding chairs, a small voice cut through the murmur. "Master Marcus?" Heads turned. The voice belonged to a boy no older than 8. He wore an oversized gi with the sleeves bunched up at the wrists and a patch sewn on crookedly by hand. His name tag read, Tommy Chen. Marcus turned toward the boy and crouched down so they were eye level. "Yes, Tommy." The boy hesitated, his fingers playing with the hem of his belt. "Are you still going to teach us how to fight?" There was no defiance in the question, no sarcasm, just a pure, honest curiosity. the kind that only a child could carry without weight. Marcus paused, then slowly knelt onto one knee. "Yes," he said, "I'll still teach you how to fight." Tommy nodded. "But," Marcus added, "now I'll also teach you how not to." Tommy tilted his head. "How not to fight?" Marcus smiled. "Exactly. How to walk away. How to breathe when you're mad. How to hold your power without hurting anyone. That's the hard part. That's the real training." Tommy's eyes lit up. "Cool." The moment landed heavier than anyone expected. The adults nearby went quiet. Some put a hand over their heart. A few bowed their heads. In the far corner of the room, near the back wall, a man stood motionless. He was older, worn in the way only time and guilt could weather someone. His arms were crossed, his jaw trembling. He had arrived without announcing himself. Didn't check in. Didn't say a word. But now, with Tommy's question and Marcus's answer echoing through the room, his eyes filled. It was Marcus's father. He stayed in the shadows, but everything in his body shifted. Something had broken open. Marcus didn't notice his father at first. His focus remained on Tommy, whose bright eyes seemed to soak in every word like sunlight. But the silence that followed their exchange wasn't empty. It was thick with emotion. Even Keanu had paused mid-conversation, turning his head slightly as if he could feel the ripple Tommy's question had created. Sophia gently placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder and whispered, "That was beautiful." He nodded but didn't speak. His gaze swept the room, and that's when he saw him. The man near the wall, gray hair, military posture softened by age, a face Marcus hadn't seen in years but couldn't forget. The same one that looked back at him in the mirror sometimes when he was exhausted, worn out, or wrestling with pride. The man hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, but his eyes told the truth. They were wet. Marcus froze. Sophia followed his line of sight. Her breath caught. He didn't know whether to run toward him or away. The last conversation they'd had ended with slammed doors and words neither of them ever meant. But this moment, this fragile thread connecting them across the room, felt sacred. Marcus stood and took a hesitant step forward. His father didn't move. Keanu noticed. He quietly stepped back to give them space. Marcus took another step. Still, the man didn't move, but the look in his eyes was no longer distant. It was pleading. So Marcus walked all the way to him. They stood inches apart. Neither spoke. Then the older man broke the silence. "I was wrong. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rehearsed. It was raw, bare, full of gravel and regret." Marcus didn't say anything right away. His throat tightened. His fists had been clenched for years, and now he felt them begin to open. His father added, "You didn't need to be the best. You just needed to be loved." Marcus nodded, swallowing hard. "I wanted to show you I was worth something," he said. His father's voice cracked. "You always were." There, in the crowded gym, surrounded by students, strangers, and media lights, two men reconciled without a single headline noticing. And that made it even more powerful. Marcus and his father embraced. No words at first, just years of silence and misunderstanding melting into a quiet, steady moment of grace. It wasn't flashy. No one rushed to photograph it. But something about that hug made even the room feel smaller, as if time paused to let healing breathe. When they stepped apart, Walter's eyes were red. "I should have come sooner," he said. Marcus shook his head. "You came when I needed you." They didn't need to say more. The pain had spoken loud enough in the past. This moment belonged to peace. Tommy wandered over again, tugging at Marcus's sleeve. "Can we practice more now?" Marcus smiled, wiping his face with the back of his wrist. "Of course, let's do it." Tommy glanced at Walter. "Is that your dad?" Marcus nodded. Tommy offered a hand. "Hi, I'm Tommy." Walter knelt slowly and shook it. "Hi, Tommy, I'm Walter." The boy grinned. "You can watch us if you want." Walter's voice cracked just slightly. "I'd like that." Marcus looked at his father, reached over to the locker shelf and handed him a white belt. "Start here." Walter stared at it a moment, then tied it on, awkward but proud. Sophia rang a small chime. Everyone gathered one last time. Marcus stood in the center of the mat with Keanu and Walter behind him, children at his feet. He looked at the kids, then at the grown-ups still seated quietly around the gym. "Every one of us is fighting something," he said. "Fear, anger, loneliness, the need to prove ourselves. But maybe the real strength is showing up anyway, even when it hurts, even when you're scared." No applause followed, only silence. Not empty silence, but grateful silence, the kind that lives in a room long after the lights are turned off. And somewhere near the back, Walter smiled for the first time in a long, long time. By the next morning, the footage had already been posted online. Not by a news station, not by a PR team, but by someone in the audience who had filmed with shaky hands and a full heart. The clip wasn't edited. There were no flashy graphics or dramatic music, just raw video of Keanu Reeves moving slowly across a mat with a child, guiding him through a simple kata with patience and presence. The caption under the video read, "He didn't teach him to fight, he taught him to stand." Within hours, the views climbed into the hundreds of thousands. By noon, it had passed 1 million. Headlines followed, but they weren't the kind people were used to seeing after a celebrity appearance. These weren't about controversy or confrontation. They were about something deeper. Keanu Reeves ends challenge with compassion. Martial arts demonstration becomes lesson in grace. From mockery to mentorship, the man who changed mid-fight. The story spread because it didn't fit the script. There was no comeback knockout, no mic drop moment, no viral humiliation. Instead, it showed a man stepping back, listening, elevating someone else. And people weren't just watching it, they were feeling it. In the comments, strangers began confessing personal stories. "My dad was like Marcus's father. I haven't spoken to him in years. This made me want to try. I teach middle school kids, and we watched this in homeroom. 3 of them cried." Keanu didn't just shut down a bully. He turned him into a brother. Keanu's name trended globally for 24 hours, but something unusual happened this time. Marcus's did too. People dug up the original video, the one where he had mocked Keanu weeks earlier. They reposted both clips side by side. The transformation was undeniable. The man who once smirked with bravado had bowed before a child and said he wanted to be better than who he was yesterday. It didn't feel like damage control. It felt like redemption. Reporters called. Talk shows reached out. A famous podcast offered Marcus a generous sum just for an interview about the experience. He turned them all down. Marcus didn't decline out of pride. He declined because something inside him had shifted permanently. He didn't want to talk about change, he wanted to live it. Instead of sitting for interviews, he spent more time at the gym. He opened a new beginner class for kids who couldn't afford lessons. No cameras, no announcements, just quiet flyers posted in school lobbies and taped to community center windows. He didn't try to rewrite the narrative, he just started showing up differently. Sophia noticed it immediately. He no longer rushed through warm-ups or barked orders from across the room. He walked the mats with a softer tone, correcting with care, and listening more than speaking. He began each class with 2 questions. How are you, and what are you carrying today? The students didn't always know how to answer, but over time, they started responding not just with words, but with more focused effort, more mutual respect. One afternoon, a teenager who had previously been suspended for fighting outside school came up to Marcus and handed him a folded note. Inside were just 5 words. "You made me think first." Marcus kept that note in his locker, beside a photo of him and Walter, his father, taken the week after the demonstration. They had started having coffee together once a week, not to unpack the past all at once, but just to sit and let the silence between them become something safe. Meanwhile, Keanu had vanished again. There were no interviews, no press release, no statement. One day he was there, bowing on the mat. The next, he wasn't. And that was exactly how he intended it. The man who could have turned the moment into a global PR win chose instead to disappear. But what he left behind was louder than any quote or soundbite. He left healing. People across the internet began sharing clips of Keanu's quiet gestures, helping a child fix a belt, bowing to Walter, standing silently behind Marcus while he spoke. Those gestures became gifs, remixed videos, and storytime narrations. But even through the digital noise, what stuck with people wasn't the spectacle. It was the stillness. Stillness that felt rare. Stillness that felt earned. In a world constantly chasing the next loud moment, the quiet ones sometimes linger longer. That's what happened in the weeks that followed. The story didn't fade like most viral moments do. It deepened. Teachers printed still images from the event and hung them in classrooms. One high school in Portland played the video during a school assembly and followed it with a discussion on emotional maturity. A women's shelter in Texas started a self-defense program and named it "Stand Soft, Stand Strong," after a phrase Keanu had said during the demonstration. But perhaps the most meaningful ripple effect happened inside the gym itself. Tommy, the little boy with the oversized gi, became a sort of unofficial mascot. His question, "Are you still going to teach us how to fight?" was printed on the wall above the main mat. Below it, in bold red lettering, was Marcus's reply. "Yes, but now I'll also teach you how not to." Every student passed those words on their way to warm-up drills. Parents began to approach Marcus with stories. One mother said her son had started taking deep breaths instead of punching walls. Another told him that her daughter, who never trusted men, had said, "He listens like Keanu." They weren't compliments, they were confirmations. That the culture was changing. That what was planted that day was growing roots. Walter became a quiet fixture at the gym. He never tried to lead. He just showed up, white belt and all, standing in the back with slow, careful movements. He and Marcus didn't speak often during class, but their bond was clear. When class ended, they always left together. Sometimes they didn't even train, just sat on the bench by the parking lot, sipping coffee in companionable silence. Keanu, true to form, never returned for a spotlight, but his absence was never felt as abandonment. It was understood as a gift, like he knew when his part in the story was complete. And perhaps that's what made the impact even greater. He didn't stay to be celebrated. He walked away once healing had taken root. One morning, Sophia found a folded note on the front desk. No name, just a simple white envelope tucked beneath the attendance sheet. She opened it slowly. Inside were 5 words, written in sharp but gentle handwriting. "You're running a sacred space." There was no signature, but she knew who it was from. Keanu had left the building, but he hadn't left the story. 3 months later, Dragonfire Academy didn't look much different from the outside. The same brick walls, the same faded red door, the same rows of shoes neatly lined up just inside the entrance. But something deep within the gym had shifted. It was no longer a place where people came to prove something. It had become a place where people came to feel something. The transformation began subtly. The old mission statement, painted near the entrance, had been scrubbed off. In its place, above the stretching mats, was a new motto: "Strength is in service." Beneath it hung a framed photo of Marcus, bowing beside Tommy. Below that photo was the full quote, "Yes, but now I'll also teach you how not to." Every class now began the same way, not with punches or kicks, but with a circle. Marcus would sit with his students, legs crossed, palms on his knees, and ask, "What are we carrying today?" Sometimes the answers were lighthearted: a test at school, a sprained finger, a lost soccer game. Other times they were heavy: a sick parent, a bully in the hallway, a feeling they couldn't quite name. Marcus never forced anyone to speak, but more and more they did. The mat became a safe place before it became a training space. Sophia helped set the tone, organizing monthly parent nights. Some evenings they'd invite therapists to speak. Other times they just shared stories. Marcus hosted his own workshop once a month, the Inner Black Belt. It wasn't about sparring. It was about recognizing emotional triggers and learning how to respond instead of react. Kids came for the martial arts. They stayed for the understanding. One 12-year-old named Javier told Marcus he had stopped yelling at his little brother because of the breathing exercise he'd learned in class. Another, a quiet girl named Kayla, handed Marcus a folded paper after class that said, "I didn't think strong people could be kind. You proved me wrong." Marcus kept that note too. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't dared hope for. Useful. Not famous. Not feared. Just useful. Grounded. Trusted. A part of something that mattered more than reputation. Marcus began noticing things he used to overlook. The tension in a student's shoulders when their name was called. The way some kids flinched at loud noises, not from the sounds of combat, but from what they reminded them of at home. He started adjusting his teaching style, not softer but more attuned. He made eye contact when giving feedback. He stayed after class if someone looked like they needed to talk. Sometimes he just sat beside them in silence until they spoke. Walter, now attending twice a week, became a quiet presence that the students grew to appreciate. He never tried to command the room. He simply listened and trained slowly, often partnering with the kids who were struggling most. When one boy couldn't master a simple sweep and grew frustrated to the point of tears, it was Walter who knelt beside him and said, "You don't have to get it today. Just don't walk away from it." That sentence spread through the academy like a mantra. Sophia printed it and taped it on the inside of every locker. Marcus looked forward to those evenings when the gym was empty, the lights dimmed, and he and Walter wiped down the mats together. They didn't always speak, but the quiet was never awkward anymore. It was understood. One night, Sophia stood at the door, watching them clean. "You realize this place is different now," she said. Marcus looked up. "Different how?" "Safer. Not just for the kids, for us too." Marcus thought about that long after she locked the door. He had spent so many years thinking that strength meant keeping people out. Now he saw that real strength was letting them in. Parents started sending thank you notes, some handwritten, some emailed, a few even brought in person. One said, "My daughter never liked sports, but she calls this her favorite hour of the week. Not because of the kicks, but because you ask how she's feeling." Another simply read, "Thank you for teaching my son how to stay human in a world that tries to make him numb." Marcus read every one of them, not out of vanity, but out of awe. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't trying to be a legend. He was just trying to be present. One Friday afternoon, a boy named Devin lingered after class. He was 14, tall for his age, with a nervous energy he tried to hide under sarcasm and slouched posture. Marcus had noticed him hanging back for weeks, always packing up slower than the others, always looking like he had more to say but didn't know how. That day, Marcus just sat on the bench and waited. Devin finally approached, clutching his water bottle. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus nodded. "Of course." Devin hesitated. "What if I mess up again? What if I learn all this stuff and then I still blow up at people?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch just long enough to make it meaningful. "Then you breathe, and you try again," he said. "None of us are here to be perfect. We're here to keep showing up." Devin looked down at the mat, then nodded. "Okay." Before he walked out, he turned and added, "This place feels different than I thought it would. I thought it'd make me tougher." "It will," Marcus said, "just not in the way you expected." Later that night, Marcus sat alone at his desk after everyone had gone. He opened a notebook he'd been keeping, part journal, part curriculum in progress. On the first page, he had written, "Teach with your hands, lead with your heart." That sentence had come to him after the first time he sat beside Tommy. It stuck. He flipped to a fresh page and began writing a new section for the next month's workshop, responding without armor. It was something he was still learning himself. And then he did something he hadn't done in years. He smiled without thinking, not for anyone else, not for the camera, just because he liked who he was becoming. At Dragonfire Academy, the trophies were still on the shelves. The belts still hung in neat progression on the back wall. But no one pointed to them much anymore. What people remembered, instead, were the moments. A shared breath, a held hand, a quiet apology whispered between rounds. The gym hadn't lost its fire. It had just found its warmth. And Marcus? He didn't need to go viral again. He had found something better. A reason to stay, a reason to serve, a reason to believe that change, real change, was not only possible but contagious. The letter arrived on a Monday, tucked inside a plain white envelope with no return address. It had been placed on the front desk sometime during the morning class, unnoticed among the usual stack of waiver forms and registration slips. Sophia found it when she was sorting through the papers that afternoon and immediately recognized the handwriting. She didn't say anything, just quietly walked it back to Marcus's office, knocked gently, and handed it over without a word. Marcus held the envelope for a moment before opening it. There was something sacred about the weight of it. No flash, no fanfare, just thick paper, folded neatly, and written in Keanu's unmistakable script. Sharp, thoughtful, deliberate. He unfolded it slowly and began to read. "Marcus, I didn't say goodbye when I left the gym that day because I didn't think the story needed a final scene. Some things are better left open-ended. But there are a few things I want you to know." Marcus leaned back in his chair, already feeling the weight in his chest. "People often ask me what it's like to teach, what it means to pass on knowledge. I used to think it was about giving something away, but the truth is, real teaching is just reminding someone of what they already know. I didn't teach you, you remembered yourself. That's all any teacher can hope for." The words sat heavy on the page, not as praise, but as truth. "You were always strong, but now you are steady. That's rarer, and it's more powerful than any belt. I heard about the new motto on the wall. I heard about Walter coming back. I heard about the breathing circles and the girl who said she didn't think strong people could be kind. That's the dojo now. That's your legacy. You didn't just change the room, you changed the culture. And that's what makes it last." Marcus paused there, swallowing hard. He turned over the letter and saw one last sentence scrawled at the bottom. "I enclosed something that someone once gave me. I don't need it anymore." Carefully tucked into the folds of the letter was a small object wrapped in soft cloth. Marcus unwrapped the cloth slowly, almost reverently. Inside was a small pendant, no larger than a thumbprint. It was made of brushed silver, slightly worn around the edges. The design was simple, an open hand, palm facing out. Carved into the base of the symbol was a single word in fine, etched lettering. He stared at it for a long moment, running his fingers along the edge. It was light in weight but carried something ancient in feeling. He didn't need to ask what it meant. The meaning was clear. This wasn't a token of power. It wasn't about defense or offense or even technique. It was a symbol of presence, an invitation, a reminder that the strongest places we can build are the ones where people feel safe. Safe to fail, to speak, to be wrong, to grow. Marcus stood slowly, still holding the pendant. He walked out of his office and into the main gym. The evening sun filtered through the high windows, casting long golden streaks across the mats. A few students lingered, finishing their stretches. Sophia looked up as he entered. Without a word, Marcus crossed the room to the dojo's back wall. On that wall hung framed photos, handprints of past students, and mementos of moments that shaped the space. In the center was the new motto, "Strength is in service." He reached up and carefully hooked the pendant beneath it. It fit perfectly, the open hand resting just below the word strength, the word safe, catching the light like a quiet whisper. Sophia walked over, eyes soft. "What is it?" Marcus didn't speak right away. He just smiled, something that was passed on. She looked at it again, then nodded, as if understanding it without needing to be told. That night, when the last class ended and the mats were cleaned, Marcus stood for a while beneath the pendant. He didn't feel elevated, he didn't feel special. What he felt was settled. Like a chapter had been written, not in ink, but in effort. And it didn't end with a period. It ended with a pause. A new kind of silence. One that didn't echo with emptiness, but with presence. The next morning, Marcus opened class like he always did, with a circle. The kids sat cross-legged, waiting for the usual question, "What are we carrying today?" But this time, he didn't speak right away. Instead, he pointed to the new addition on the wall. "The pendant," he said, "was given to me by someone who helped change this place. He said he didn't need it anymore." The kids turned to look. Some squinted to read the tiny word etched into the silver. "He says safe," Tommy whispered. Marcus nodded. "That's what this space is. That's what you make it every time you walk in here and choose to be honest. Every time you show up, even when you're scared or sad or unsure. That's what strength looks like." He scanned the room, watching the quiet reactions ripple across young faces. When you grow up, you might forget some of the moves. You might forget how to throw a perfect punch or break fall. But if you remember this, he tapped his chest, you'll carry the most important part of this dojo with you wherever you go. Devin raised his hand. "Did the guy who gave it to you used to wear it?" Marcus smiled. "No, he carried it, in his pocket, quietly." Kayla spoke up next. "Why'd he give it to you?" Marcus paused, then answered with gentleness, "Because he thought I was ready to protect something bigger than myself." That sentence lingered longer than he expected. No one rushed to move on. Even the younger kids sat a little straighter, as if the gravity of what he said filled the room with a new kind of weight, one that didn't push down, but grounded. When class ended, no one ran out the door. They stayed to help fold the mats, tidy the shelves, and straighten the shoes. A few of the older students went to the wall and stood beneath the pendant, reading the word again and again. Later that week, Sophia found Marcus alone in the gym, staring at it once more. "You miss him?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "Every day." She smiled. Funny how someone can leave a room, and still be in every corner of it. He didn't respond with words, just a slow, quiet nod. Because she was right. Keanu hadn't disappeared. He had simply stepped aside, so others could step forward. The invitation arrived in a blue folder with the logo of the National Youth Leadership Forum printed across the front in silver foil. Inside was a letter, typed on crisp stationery, addressed to Marcus Lang. The organizers explained that they had seen the viral videos, heard the ripple stories coming from Dragonfire Academy, and wanted him to speak on the opening night of the annual conference in Chicago. Sophia found the envelope on his desk and brought it to him. Marcus opened it slowly, read through the entire thing twice, then placed it back in the folder and slid it aside. "I'm not going," he said. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" He shrugged. "I'm not a public speaker. I don't have a degree. I'm just a guy running a gym." She didn't argue, she just nodded and walked away. Later that afternoon, as Marcus was resetting the mats, Tommy came bounding over in his usual rush of energy and curiosity. "Hey, what's that shiny paper on your desk?" he asked. Marcus hesitated, then told him, "Some people want me to go talk at a big conference, like in front of a lot of kids." Tommy's eyes widened. Whoa, like 1,000? Maybe more. You're gonna do it, right? Marcus shook his head. I don't think so, buddy. Tommy's smile faded. Why not? Marcus gave a weak smile. Because I'm not sure I belong up there. Tommy tilted his head. But what if another kid like me is out there? What if they're waiting to hear someone like you? That question landed harder than any belt stripe Marcus had ever earned. He looked at Tommy, this small boy who had asked the simplest, deepest question during that fateful demonstration. A question that had changed everything. Do you think we have a Marcus didn't respond right away. He just nodded slowly. That night, he pulled the letter back out of the folder and emailed the conference organizers. Thank you for the invitation. I would be honored to speak. The next few weeks flew by. Sophia helped him prepare. Walter told him stories from his time briefing soldiers to calm his nerves, and every time Marcus felt the doubt creep back in, he remembered Tommy's voice. What if another kid like me is out there? The auditorium in Chicago was massive. Arched ceiling, polished wooden stage, stadium-style seating that seemed to go on forever. Marcus had never stood in a place like it. The event staff gave him a laminated badge, led him through the backstage hallway, and handed him a microphone with a warm smile and the words, "You're going to be great." He nodded, but his palms were sweating. He looked down at his notes. They were scribbled, not elegant, just thoughts he had jotted down on the plane ride over. Words about strength, silence, and the long road between them. He almost crumpled them and walked away. But then he saw someone in the third row. A small boy with thick glasses and a name tag that read Tomas. Not Tommy, but close enough. The boy was leaning forward, eyes wide, ready to listen. Marcus took a slow breath and walked to the center of the stage. The spotlight warmed his shoulders as he looked out at the crowd. I was supposed to come up here and tell you how I changed my life, he began. But the truth is, I didn't change it. I just stopped running from it. The audience fell silent. I used to think being strong meant having the fastest fists or the sharpest words. But that kind of strength always fades. The real kind, the kind that stays with you, is the kind that listens when it wants to yell. That gets back up when it wants to hide. He paused, his voice growing steadier. You don't have to win every battle, just the one inside yourself. That line echoed. It hung in the room like a flag. He didn't rush through the speech. He let each word breathe. He talked about Keanu, about the day that changed everything, about Tommy, about a pendant with an open hand and a single word etched into it. Safe. He didn't tell them how to be great, he told them how to stay grounded. And when he finished, he folded his notes in half, stepped back from the mic, and bowed. At first, it was quiet. Then one clap. Then a few more. Then the entire room stood up. A standing ovation. Not for performance, but for presence. Backstage, Marcus sat on a folding chair, gripping a bottle of water with both hands. He wasn't shaking anymore. The nerves had faded, replaced by a calm he hadn't expected. A few of the conference organizers passed by and thanked him, saying things like powerful and exactly what we needed. But it wasn't their approval that stayed with him. It was the line of students forming quietly near the side exit. One by one, they came to him. Some didn't say much. They just nodded or offered a quiet thank you. One girl, maybe 16, handed him a note folded into a perfect square. It read, I thought I had to be perfect to be heard, but now I think maybe I just have to be honest. A tall boy in a hoodie told him, I thought fighting meant fists. You made me realize I've been fighting myself. Another leaned in and whispered, I lost my dad last year. What you said helped me breathe again. Marcus didn't have answers for all of them, but he listened. Fully. Openly. Like Keanu had done for him. Like Tommy had done without knowing it. like Walter had started doing, once he put the past down long enough to be present. Later that night, back in his hotel room, Marcus opened his laptop and pulled up the dojo's website. He clicked over to the About Us page and started typing. "We don't train you to win every fight. We train you to understand which ones matter." Then he added a new photo to the top of the page, one of the pendant Keanu had sent, now framed on the dojo wall. Beneath it, he wrote one word: safe. He closed the laptop and stood at the window, staring out at the quiet city lights below. His phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. "Tommy says, 'Did you win?'" Marcus smiled and typed back, "Tell him I didn't have to. I just showed up." In that moment, Marcus realized something. He had never imagined himself on a stage, never thought his voice could reach beyond the walls of the gym. But it had. And not because he spoke loudly, because he had something real to say, and someone out there had been waiting to hear it. The idea came during a quiet Sunday morning cleanup. Marcus and Sophia were sweeping the mats after the youth class had ended. The kids had just left, their laughter still echoing faintly through the high-ceilinged dojo. Marcus paused, leaning on his broom, looking up at the pendant on the wall. "We've built something here," he said softly. "But I think it's only the beginning." Sophia looked up from the gear closet. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we have this space where kids are learning to breathe again, to speak, to feel safe in their own skin. But it can't just be our space. There are kids all over the country carrying pain they don't have words for. They don't need just a dojo. They need somewhere to heal." She nodded slowly. "So, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking of something bigger, something we give away." That night, they sat down with notebooks, dry erase boards, and 3 cups of black coffee. By the end of the weekend, the program had a name: the Warrior Heart. It would be more than a martial arts curriculum. It would combine movement with mindfulness, sparring with self-awareness. Students would still learn physical defense, but woven into every belt level would be emotional intelligence, trauma education, and mentorship. Every class would begin with reflection. Every instructor would be trained in mental health first aid. Every space would follow one core value: we don't make people tough, we make them whole. They spent months building the program. Sophia worked on the curriculum design and community outreach. Marcus started training new staff. They brought in psychologists, teachers, and trauma specialists. They held their first pilot course with 15 students from the local public school system. It worked. Kids who used to flinch at correction began to raise their hands with questions. Teenagers who'd been suspended for fighting now led warm-up stretches and encouraged younger students. And parents, they didn't just drop their kids off, they stayed. They listened, they learned. The dojo felt fuller than ever before, not in numbers, in depth. But what surprised Marcus the most came in a plain envelope. No signature, no letter, just a check, quietly deposited into the program's fund by an anonymous donor. Sophia held it up and smiled. "I think we know who this is." Marcus didn't say it aloud, but he knew. The signature may have been missing, but the gesture was unmistakable. Keanu's way was always the same. No spotlight, no credit, just quiet support when it mattered most. The donation covered mats for 3 more partner gyms, uniforms for every kid in the pilot program, and stipends for volunteer mentors. It was more than money. It was momentum. With that support, Warrior Heart expanded. Marcus and Sophia hosted a closed-door instructor retreat at a mountain lodge 3 hours from the city. It wasn't about belt ranks or certifications. It was about creating safe leaders. The kind who could sit with a child's anger without reacting to it. The kind who could hold space for grief and joy in the same hour. They gathered 20 instructors from different cities, different disciplines, and different walks of life. The second evening of the retreat, just before dinner, a black car pulled into the gravel lot outside the lodge. No one had been expecting it. No one said a word. But as soon as the door opened and Keanu stepped out, every instructor stood instinctively. He didn't wave. He didn't speak. He simply bowed. Then he walked inside, removed his shoes, and joined them on the mat. They practiced together in silence. Simple breathing drills, stretches, and a single flow sequence that Marcus had taught earlier that day. Keanu moved as he always did, not to be seen, but to be part of the whole. After the session ended, he gave one deep bow to Marcus and handed him a small leather pouch. Inside were 5 more pendants, identical to the one hanging on the dojo wall. Each one carved with the word, "safe." Then he left. No speech, no photos, only a presence. Sophia turned to Marcus, blinking back tears. "Did you know he was coming?" "No," Marcus said, "but I think he's always been watching." That night, they passed out the pendants to the 5 instructors who had shared their own stories of transformation. One had survived addiction. Another had grown up in the foster system. Each of them had found their own version of healing, and now they were ready to pass it on, not as heroes, but as guides. Within a year, Warrior Heart programs began appearing across the country. A dojo in Oregon adapted it for kids with sensory sensitivities. A community center in Baltimore used it as part of a school reentry program for teens who had been expelled. A tribal council in New Mexico invited Marcus and Sophia to teach Warrior Heart to local mentors, blending it with indigenous wisdom about healing and honor. The movement was quiet but powerful. Marcus insisted on one rule for every new location. It wasn't about him. His name could not be the brand. Warrior Heart had to belong to the people who used it. It had to feel local, personal, alive. The strength of the program wasn't in its logo. It was in the way it taught kids to ask, "What am I feeling right now?" before they asked, "What move do I use?" Every few weeks, Marcus would receive letters and emails from instructors he'd never met. One read, "A student came in with bruises no one could explain. After 3 classes, he looked me in the eye for the first time." Another, "I've been teaching for 20 years. This is the first time I feel like I'm building people, not just fighters." Sophia compiled these stories into a digital journal, archiving them so that every instructor, new or seasoned, could remember what the work was really about. Back at Dragonfire Academy, the original dojo had become the heart of it all. The walls bore messages from visiting instructors. The pendant from Keanu remained on display, now surrounded by others, each one gifted by leaders who had taken Warrior Heart and given it new life in their own cities. Tommy was now a junior assistant instructor, helping lead warm-ups for the younger classes. He still carried that spark, the curiosity, the honesty, but now he also carried confidence. He walked differently, spoke with more ease, and sometimes, when new students arrived looking scared or unsure, he would sit beside them quietly and say, "It's okay, we all start nervous." One afternoon, he asked Marcus, "Did you ever think all of this would happen?" Marcus laughed. "No, I thought I was just trying to stop a fight." Tommy grinned. "I think you started something bigger." Marcus looked around the room, at the kids, the instructors, the parents who stayed after class just to listen, and nodded. "I think so too." And in the center of it all, where strength had once been measured in force, now stood something far greater. A beating heart, 1 year to the day. That's how long it had been since the demonstration that changed everything. Marcus stood barefoot on the polished mat, his feet in the exact spot where he once stood facing Keanu Reeves, full of ego, pride, and the need to prove something. The gym looked the same in many ways. Same layout, same wall mirrors, same quiet hum of early morning silence, but the feeling inside was completely different. The dojo was alive in a way it had never been before. On the far wall, above the framed pendant and beneath the Warrior Heart banner, a new plaque had been installed. It wasn't large, it wasn't flashy, just a piece of oak with clean, carved lettering. The strongest thing you can do is help someone else feel safe. Marcus ran his fingers across the wood, reading it for the 100th time. That phrase had come to him months ago, during a conversation with Sophia, after a student who had survived domestic abuse finally completed her first full class without freezing during contact drills. It had stuck with him. Now it was carved into the heart of the space. He turned as the door creaked open. Tommy entered with his usual energy, now 10 years old and standing taller than ever. He wore a red t-shirt marked Junior Instructor and carried a small clipboard with the day's warm-up plan written in his own handwriting. He dropped his gym bag by the locker and ran onto the mat. "Morning, Master Marcus." Marcus grinned. "Morning, Coach Tommy." Tommy puffed his chest a little at the title. They bowed to each other, then started going over the class plan. Tommy had picked out a new focus for the day: balance drills that taught kids to respond to pressure without collapsing. Sophia had taught him that concept after a long chat about stress and resilience. Just as they finished reviewing the routine, the main doors opened again, and Sophia walked in. She wasn't wearing her gi today. She moved slower, both hands resting on the small but unmistakable curve of her belly. Marcus walked over and kissed her forehead. "How's our little warrior?" She smiled. "Kicking? A lot." Sophia sat on the side bench as the first students began trickling in. Parents waved at Marcus and Tommy while untying shoes and helping their kids settle in. The mood was warm, grounded, like a big family getting ready for something sacred. Today wasn't just any class. A local news station had reached out weeks earlier asking to do a short segment on the Warrior Heart movement, and Sophia had agreed. They thought it would be a good way to bring attention to the new community outreach programs launching at other locations. Marcus wasn't exactly thrilled about being interviewed, but he knew it mattered. By 9:30, the class was full, with kids lining the edge of the mat and parents sitting against the back wall. A young reporter with a handheld mic and a cameraman approached Marcus between stretches. "Mind if we talk for a minute before class?" the reporter asked gently. Marcus nodded. "Sure." They stepped to the corner near the plaque. "We've heard a lot about Dragonfire Academy and Warrior Heart," she began. "What would you say is different about how you teach now compared to how you started?" Marcus glanced toward the center of the mat, where Tommy was leading a circle of breathing exercises. He smiled. "When I started, I taught people how to fight. I thought that's what they needed." He paused. "But now, I teach people how to stop fighting." The reporter blinked. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean," Marcus said, "I teach people how to listen before they hit, how to breathe before they shout, how to recognize what they're feeling instead of burying it. That's what keeps the real battles from ever starting." The reporter looked down at her notes, then back at him. "That's powerful." "It's necessary," he replied, "because no one ever really wins a fight, not the ones that happen outside, or the ones we carry inside." She asked a few more questions about the national program, the partnerships with schools, the parent-led workshops. Marcus answered each one clearly, but always brought it back to the same core message: create safety, and everything else becomes possible. By the time they wrapped, class had begun. Tommy was demonstrating a flow sequence with two younger students, coaching them through each motion with patience far beyond his years. As the camera crew quietly packed up, the parents applauded lightly, more for Tommy's gentle leadership than anything else. Marcus stepped back onto the mat, watching the kids move. They weren't rushing. They weren't performing. They were learning in the way he had come to respect most, through connection. He looked across the dojo, letting the full picture settle in. Sophia, glowing, sat beside a young mother whose daughter had just started classes last week. Walter stood at the back, arms crossed, nodding along as a new instructor guided the older students through breathwork. The plaque on the wall caught the light. It felt right. After class, the kids bowed out. Some stayed to help clean, others ran to their parents, beaming with stories. Tommy walked over with his clipboard tucked under his arm. "Did I do okay?" Marcus knelt to his level. "You did more than okay. You gave them something to follow." Tommy grinned. "I like teaching." "You're good at it." Tommy glanced at the camera crew one last time. "Do you think Keanu will see it?" Marcus smiled. "If he doesn't, someone will tell him." They stacked the mats and dimmed the lights. As the last few students filtered out, Sophia joined Marcus by the door. She slid her hand into his. "Crazy to think this all started with one fight you didn't have," she whispered. Marcus nodded. "Best one I ever lost." She rested her head on his shoulder. A soft knock sounded at the front glass door. It was the reporter, now off camera and carrying a clipboard. "I forgot to ask one last thing for our notes," she said. "What would you want the world to know about what you do here?" Marcus looked at the plaque again. He stepped aside so she could see it clearly. Then he answered, "I help people feel safe. That's all." She jotted it down, said thank you, and left. Marcus stood at the door for a while after that. Watching the sunset fade through the windows, he thought about the long journey behind him. The ego, the shame, the change, and the quiet redemption that had followed. He hadn't arrived at the top of some mountain. He'd just finally come home. And in this home, the strongest warrior wasn't the one who shouted the loudest or struck the hardest. It was the one who made others feel like they belonged. The dojo was quiet again. Evening had fallen, and all the lights were off except for the soft amber glow above the center of the mat. Marcus sat cross-legged in the silence, his back straight, a small leather-bound notebook resting on his knees. He'd started journaling months ago, at Sophia's suggestion. At first, it felt awkward, writing about feelings, doubts, memories, but now it had become part of his ritual, a way to make sense of the journey. He opened to a fresh page. The pen hovered for a second. Then he wrote. It started as a joke. He paused, letting the words settle, then continued. But maybe the joke was thinking strength came from fists, from speed, from being the loudest voice in the room. I used to think a black belt made you powerful. Now I know a soft voice can too. A pause, a breath, a second chance. Strength, I've learned, comes from the heart. He read the words back to himself, then set the notebook beside him and closed his eyes. In that stillness, he could almost hear Keanu's voice. Not imagined, remembered. A quiet echo from a long time ago. You don't need to win a fight to be powerful. You just need to choose compassion when it matters most. Marcus breathed deeply. That line had stayed with him. It had taken root, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. He looked up at the pendant on the wall, the one with the word safe. It caught the light just enough to shimmer softly, like it was nodding in agreement. From the entrance, the door creaked open. Sophia peeked in, smiled when she saw him. Still here? Marcus nodded, just writing. She stepped in, sat beside him. No questions, just presence. They sat that way for a while, no words needed. Then she leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "You've changed a lot." Marcus smiled. I had help. He picked up the notebook again and wrote one final sentence before closing it. Sometimes, the best way to fight is to stop fighting. Sophia gently traced the stitching on the edge of the notebook with her finger. Do you think he ever knew how much he started? Marcus didn't answer immediately. He looked around the dojo, the worn mats, the framed photos, the row of student shoes by the entrance. It was all so familiar now, but it hadn't always felt like home. Once, it had felt like a battlefield. Now, it felt like sanctuary. I think he knew, Marcus said, but I don't think he needed to see it. Sophia nodded. That's the rare kind of strength, isn't it? Doing something good and not waiting around to be thanked. He smiled. Sounds like someone else I know. She nudged his shoulder playfully. We've all grown up a little. They sat in peaceful silence again. Outside, the wind pushed softly against the windows, and the distant hum of city traffic rolled through like waves. Sophia eventually stood up and stretched. "I'm going to head home. Want me to wait for you?" Marcus shook his head. "I'll lock up." She kissed the top of his head and walked to the door, pausing only to turn back and say, "Don't forget to turn off the light over the mat." "Never do," he said. When the door closed behind her, Marcus sat still for a few more minutes. Then he stood, picked up the notebook, and walked to the back wall. He stood under the plaque, reading it one more time. "The strongest thing you can do is help someone else feel safe." He whispered it to himself once, not for memory, but for meaning. Then he placed the notebook gently on the bench beneath it and bowed, not for ceremony, but for gratitude. The kind of gratitude that doesn't need music or applause. The kind that lives quietly in your chest and holds your breath for a second longer than usual. As he turned off the light above the mat, the glow faded slowly, like the last ember of a fire being tucked in for the night. But even as the room darkened, nothing felt lost. It felt held. It felt whole. Outside, the night air was cool and calm. Marcus stepped out, locked the door behind him, and looked up at the sky. It was clear. No clouds, just stars. He stood there for a moment, his hands in his jacket pockets, his breath visible in the chilled air. A car passed on the street, slow and quiet. A dog barked in the distance. Then silence again. It struck him how different everything felt now. Not just the gym, not just the way he taught, but himself. He wasn't chasing something anymore. He wasn't trying to win. He was just living and helping others do the same. He thought about the next day's lesson plan. Tommy had suggested a group reflection exercise before drills. Devin was preparing his first full class for teens. A new family had registered earlier that morning. Parents who had read about Warrior Heart in a parenting blog and drove 2 hours just to sign up in person. It was happening, quietly, deeply. The world was changing, one breath, one bow, one safe space at a time. Marcus walked to his car, paused before getting in, and looked back at the building one last time. Dragonfire Academy, he smiled to himself. Then, as if the moment had waited for it, Keanu's voice echoed in memory once more. "You don't need to win a fight to be powerful. You just need to choose compassion when it matters most." Marcus let that line sit with him. It wasn't just a quote anymore. It had become a philosophy, a way of living, a code stronger than any belt. As he drove home that night, headlights lighting up the empty road, Marcus felt something deep and still inside him. A knowing. He hadn't just changed his path. He'd built a bridge for others. And that, he realized, was the real victory. Now, a question for you. Have you ever mistaken toughness for strength? Have you ever believed that showing emotion made you weaker, only to learn that it made you human? We want to hear your story. Share in the comments below. And let us know, what kind of story would you like to see next? Another one about Keanu? A new face with a warrior heart, a tale of second chances? Your voice matters here. Your reflection could be the start of someone else's healing.